I see a lot of familiar names and faces. It's great to have everybody, and I'm going to be emceeing this. My name is Karen Pope, and I am here because I cross paths with both Water Solutions Network and Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, Kate, Brock, and Gray. Uh, I am recently retired from the U.S. Forest Service Pacific Southwest Research Station, where I was an aquatic ecologist studying both amphibian conservation and stream and meadow ecology and restoration. And um, that's where I crossed paths with Kate and Brock and Beavers in general. And then I also was a member of cohort 2 of the Water Solutions Network and have participated with the Water Solutions Network pretty consistently since then. And then finally, I'm also a steering committee member, chair of the California Process-Based Restoration Network. And this is a group that shares information about restoration and also really promotes beaver-based restoration and conservation. Um, we're gonna get started. Are we good on that, Angelica? And we're gonna start out by introducing the Water Solutions Network, and I'm really pleased to have Debbie Franco here to do that.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you so much for emceeing this workshop. I too am excited to see so many familiar names and faces. I really am loving the diverse array of folks who are participating in our workshops. We are the Watershed Solutions Network, and we, as Karen mentioned, we started as Water Solutions Network, and we did a series of intensive cohorts that a group of 20 to 24 folks who met consistently over the course of 8 or 9 months with the intention of building collaborative capacity, leadership, and centering equity. And so we have 5 cohorts of folks, about 150 or so members who've been trained up and who are out catalyzing and cultivating in just the way that we had hoped, like Karen and Cal PBR. We're super excited to see those kinds of things emerging. And now we are working to cultivate communities equitably stewarding thriving watersheds. That's our new tagline. Just it's not even fresh off the presses yet. It's in our new strategic plan that we'll be releasing shortly. And we are intentionally cross-sector, cross-jurisdictional, and tackling the challenge of aligning human and natural systems at watershed scale. We in our strategic planning process, our consultant did sort of a survey of the proverbial landscape, and it turns out we are one of few entities that's out there that's really intentionally cross-sector. There's a lot of good jurisdictional work, so we're just adding another layer on to help us to approach the complexity that better aligns with the systems we're all trying to manage. So we are actively connecting people, places, and policy across our programs, including the work that we're doing here in this workshop series. And so happy to have you all participating. And I personally am really excited to hear more about how we can be better partners with beavers. So our workshop series, we hold our workshops the fourth Thursday of each month. We hope to see many of you who are here for the first time in the future, and so glad to see so many of you returning. We cover a very broad range of topics. We're probably not like most workshop series. We have a very diverse membership, and our goal is to bring people together with the intention of cross-pollinating and building understanding across the sectors. And so beavers, it could be seen as a single sector, single issue area, but in fact, beavers have implications for and opportunities for virtually everyone who is a land steward, and everyone is a land steward. And so we try to pick topics like this and leverage our diverse membership and audience And we have done workshops on inviting tribal folks to talk about the opportunities and challenges of collaborating with tribes. We've talked about opportunities embedded in chaos. So we have, I think, an exciting and thought-provoking series. We always invite our participants to honor our WSN values. Our core values in this context are contextual confidentiality. And by that, we mean we invite you to share what you learn here, but we ask that you not tell other people's stories. So this is really important if someone shares something personal or specific to them. And if there is a reason why you think others might learn from it, then we ask you to reach out to that person, and we're happy to connect you if you don't know them, and ask that person to tell their own story or to share their own story. We invite you to listen with curiosity, especially when something makes you uncomfortable or makes you feel defensive. Oftentimes, when that's your initial response, it's a prime opportunity for growth and building new understanding. So, we very much invite participants not to engage in heated debate, but instead to engage in asking each other questions to better understand each other's perspectives. And we especially ask that during the breakouts, they're unfacilitated, so you'll be put into breakouts with other people participating. And so we encourage you all to remember to make space for everyone to engage. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Karen.
Thanks, Debbie. All right, so we are thrilled to have this amazing team from Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, the Water Institute, to talk to us about their work with beaver. They've done some amazing things in the state of California, with both legislatively, science, and just getting beaver back on the landscape. And so, uh, and also helping people control beaver on their properties. So I think they're going to be talking a lot and providing a ton of information. So I want to jump right in. They'll have about 45 minutes of presenting, and then we'll open it up for discussion after that. And then we're going to go into breakout groups where we can talk amongst ourselves and really dig into some topics that we're interested in and come back and share what we talked about a little bit, and close out. So that's the 2 hours. You are invited to put questions in the chat as we go. The team might be answering them as we go or bringing it forward for discussion in the Q&A. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Kate Lundquist, who's a co-director of the Water Institute at Occidental, and she's going to kick things off and introduce herself and her team, maybe.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen. Appreciate it. Kate Lundquist here, co-direct the Water Institute, Bring Back the Beaver campaign, Occidental Arts Ecology Center, and with my co-director, Brock Dolman, and then Gray Hayes is our Beaver Coexistence Training and Support Program Manager. You'll get to hear from them next. So I'm going to start and just give a little bit of framing about beaver life history, and then pass it to Brock, who will share more about I'm going to talk about benefits as well. Beaver's got lots of benefits. And then Brock will share more just about the behind the scenes works that we've been doing to really facilitate holistic beaver restoration. And then Gray's going to bring it home, really getting into the nitty gritty around our coexistence program and the Beaver Help Desk. So let me share my slides. And while I'm doing that, I just want to say thank you so much to the Watershed Solutions Network for inviting us. It's really an honor to be here. And just all of you who are part of this network, many of you are colleagues, friends, and it's an honor to get to share our work with you and to, yeah, be doing this work with a lot of you as well. So I am going to get my advanced thing to work. There we go. So here we are, Occidental Arts Ecology Center. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are a nonprofit that has been around for 31 years, and we have a 80-acre site in Western Sonoma County, and we're really working on collaborative conservation from ridgeline to reef. And the Water Institute is one of many programs, and here at the center, and we are really dedicated to working with lots of different folks, from landowners to communities to individuals to tribal entities and agencies and academia, and the list goes on and on. And we couldn't be doing this work without you. So we're really grateful to be sharing some of our stories about that. So our Water Institute program itself is focusing on holistic watershed restoration and species recovery literacy and implementation through doing a lot of outreach and education like we are today, demonstration of these techniques, partner capacity building, and policy change. And one of our frames, many of you who know Brock, coined the term basins of relations. And this is really just our way of articulating how thinking about how we work in a watershed and all of the different relationships that we are engaged with, not just the biological relationships, but the physical processes, all the different uh, ways that watersheds work and how all of our actions can impact those different processes and species that are there in the entire watershed, and making sure that we are taking those relationships and processes into mind when we're doing, you know, however we're doing our work in that watershed, our living and also our restoration. And for us, one of the keystone species that we have been rallying behind for decades is our iconic coho salmon. For many of the obvious reasons, they are super important, as are all of our salmonids and all of our relatives and species. And for us, witnessing the precipitous decline of coho salmon in the past few decades has been a real rallying call to get us to organize around what techniques are we not utilizing that we could be. And this is where our beloved beaver has come in as one of our really important partners in doing salmonid restoration and other species recovery, as well as watershed improving watershed function. So here we are, North American beaver, Castor canadensis. I know some of you are familiar with beavers, so excited to have you as part of this conversation. You can add your own experiences and insights when we get into our breakout groups. Um, for those of you who aren't familiar with the beaver story, they are in fact native to California. This has been disputed and is still being disputed to this day. This conversation is not over. We need help. Let's continue to really think this through. A bunch of us have gone through this process already. So beaver were extirpated from most of North America. We used to have, 80 to 400 million is the estimate, and now we're hovering around the estimate of 20 million. And so we have a lot of recovery to do. In California, their population was reduced to nearly 1,000, and yet post 1900s, many were reintroduced. And yes, they were thrown out of airplanes and with parachutes in their boxes. And that said, this is added to the confusion of where they actually occurred historically. And so early reports indicated that they were only native to the areas in this map on the right that have the hatch marks. So the northern part of the state, the Central Valley, and the Colorado River Basin. And so a bunch of us have gathered that evidence that has demonstrated that there is lots of historic tribal ethnographic accounts and physical remains of beaver and beaver dams that indicate otherwise. We're dealing with a lot of legacy impacts here in California. Thank you, Karen, for this slide, which we have adapted to. Yes, the beaver removal was a huge one of those legacy impacts, but we have many other that we have been dealing with, initially with the genocide of indigenous tribes, then the fur rush, then the gold rush, draining of our wetlands, unmanaged grazing, unmanaged logging, and then removing all the large wood from our rivers, adding all the roads, fire suppression, big dams, and now we've got mega fires. So we've got our work cut out for us, needless to say. With beaver, their whole jam is to be trying to avoid predation. So this is why aquatic habitat is really critical to their success. They are a semi-aquatic mammal. They need to have dry dens that they can sleep in, reproduce in, feed, raise their young. And so they're going to either take existing standing water bodies like this lake here and build a lodge out off the shore and have underwater entrances, or they're going to take a flowing water body, a creek, a river, that isn't deep enough and put a channel spanning dam in and build a bank burrow just upstream of it. And this is to give them deep water to escape predators and to keep their entrances underwater. When they do this, they often form these complexes that provide incredible benefits. These multiple dams can improve the water quality, trap the nutrients, and build soils as a result. And this is where a lot of our montane meadows actually come from. And this is how we're getting cleaner water in places like South Lake Tahoe, which is this a photo of Taylor Creek here. All those solids are getting trapped in that beaver dam complex. And we like to say that it's beavers that are keeping Tahoe blue. Thank you. Um, when you get these complexes, really nice mature beaver complexes, they can help buffer climate extremes. Those multiple dams act as shock absorbers for those flows that come through, absorbing that energy and just increasing the riparian resilience. And then that sinking of that water can help make those riparian areas more resilient to drought and to wildfire as well. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Emily Fairfax and Dr. Whittle's work on Smokey the Beaver, check that out. Lots of good evidence there that these beaver complexes are the only things that are surviving these landscape scale fires and providing important refuge for the species that do remain and survive. And we've got some great work happening in California as well around looking at biodiversity and carbon sequestration. This great report that was put out by Point Blue and the Institute for Bird Populations about the relationship between willow flycatcher, who are endangered here in California, and how if you look at this chart here in the center, there's a direct one-to-one correlation of the more dams per hectare you have, the greater incidence of breeding territories that you have for willow flycatcher, which that bird is in serious decline. So super helpful to know that this is a benefit so that we want to keep those beaver on the landscape so that birds and other species that really benefit will persist. And also work happening in Child's Meadow. And Karen was involved with that amongst many other colleagues to really quantify that biodiversity bump. And there's a lot of positive results showing that both carbon is being stored and the biodiversity is increasing with cascade frogs and the willow flycatcher. And there's great work happening up in the Smith River as well that we'd love to see happen in other big rivers where beavers don't build channel spanning dams. They actually are just bank burrowing and pushing their stick piles out the door. And that is creating what they're calling these river reefs that provide incredible escape cover for a lot of our native species, both the stick piles and the burrow entrances themselves, those bank lodges. And this is work by Justin Garwood of CDFW and Marissa Parrish. And wow, it'd be so amazing if we could be doing this for the Sacramento River, the San Joaquin, all of our big rivers coming off the Sierra to really look at the role that these bank lodges are playing. It's an underappreciated and valued contribution beavers are making. So as most know, beavers are considered a wetland or a keystone species, and they benefit many of our imperiled species. We already talked about the willow flycatcher, but we've also got our sage grouse and our coho are represented here as well, and cascade frogs, and there are other species as well. A lot of our insect populations and ungulates and whatnot. And I do want to give a shout out to the benefits that beaver can bring to our working landscapes as well. We do have lots of evidence, both in the arid West and in California, around how by keeping the beaver on the landscape longer, we can increase the duration of this vegetation. So this is Maggie Creek, or this is actually Susie Creek. This is a quote here down below from Jim Griggs or John Griggs from Maggie Creek. And in this area near Elko, Nevada, there are many different examples where BLM was working with Trout Unlimited and a lot of different ranchers to really help them restore the riparian, both for forage, but also for their imperiled fish species, the and cutthroat trout. And so in this case, they were able to get ranchers to agree to take the cattle off during the hot season and exclude them. And that alone was enough to allow the vegetation to recover so that the beaver returned on their own. And after that, we're able to build these incredible complexes. And now the ranchers are able to keep their cattle on these landscapes longer and are even willing to admit that they wouldn't have a ranching operation without these beaver. And so there's a really good potential there for collaborating with beaver who can be pesky at times. So as we like to say, beaver can't be everywhere, nor should they, but we're going to figure out how to work with them and support them so they can take a break. And with that, I am going to stop sharing and hand it over to Brock.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Kate, and the context and some of the backstory on the origin of our Bring Back the Beaver campaign, some of the historic ecology we had to do, a bunch of the benefits, the life history biology work and such. And so, yeah, we kicked off this Bring Back the Beaver campaign, kind of officially been rallying around trying to peg the beaver question probably since the late 90s, but we really got after it in 2008, 9 and such, and have been going full tilt ever since. Kate and I often joke that the next species we adopt when we retire will be the sloth, because no one ever says busy as a sloth. So when you're working for beaver, you're busy, which is a good thing. It's fun to be busy. So we have this website, and you can check that out. It's our web portal here. There's a ton of information and resources on that. As Kate said, at OAEC in general and the Water Institute, our theory of change in many respects is kind of the demonstration, the education, the training, and the policy rule change piece. But certainly this outreach and education, like Kate said, for today, is something we do a lot of. And we're out there stumping on the beaver stump a lot and talking to many groups and diverse audiences, much like Debbie was talking about your sort of cross-sector, cross-jurisdictional people, place, policy, diverse membership. We resonate with that. The demonstration part is something we're really committed to. We're very fond of saying in our experience when we did, we like to be able to have dirt under the nails and lower back in these things. If we're going to suggest that others do them, we want to really be engaged and participatory that way. So a lot of both the actual on-site demonstration and then supporting others doing that work in the realm of capacity building. And here's a whole a smattering of different projects and efforts have been doing recently. We had a wonderful time actually in the upper left there working with the Yurok tribe and the Maidu Summit Consortium on a beaver dam analog hands-on training on the Yurok reservation. We'll hear more a little bit. I'll talk more about the Cal PBR network, but we do these really fun trainings called the BLAB, the Build Like a Beaver. And so the one in the upper right was our most recent one. Working again, very committed to collaborations when invited to support tribal communities. And so we've spent a lot, last decade plus, actually working with the Tule River tribe down in the Southern Sierra. And then Gray's going to talk more about our relationship with the Beaver Institute and Beaver Corps as well. We do have a beaver lobbyist. I think she's certainly the first one in California, maybe in the West. And Jennifer Fearing, Fearless Advocacy. As someone we've retained for a number of years now and to really help push some of our policy wins forward that I'll talk about in a bit. But she's been amazing and just really getting after it. And as you can see here, she also likes to get in the field and build things as well. So we love that about her. At the bigger level, I would say that, much of the sort of broader movement that we in California, we at OAEC, the beaver work have really stepped into is really work that's happening nationally and in fact internationally. There's another species of beaver out there called castor fiber, the Eurasian beaver. In North America, there's this wonderful beaver restoration guidebook. This is incredible, comprehensive document. Also, folks at Utah State University and put together this low-tech process-based restoration riverscapes design manual, and those have been really supportive of our work. We've really been working with them a lot. And then OAC, and I think we're community organizers at heart, and we really engage in what we call ecosystem restoration. If we want to restore ecosystems, what's the restoration of the ecosystem? Are we part of it or apart from it? And is there an emergent opportunity for the whole to be greater than the sum of the parts by collaborating in these networks? And we really believe in that. And I've worked with a number of networks, whether it's Salmonid Restoration Federation, Sierra Meadows Partnership, California Waters, CalCan, Rangeland Conservation Coalition, lots of folks, you all today, and especially the California Process-Based Restoration Network that Karen mentioned earlier is one that we've been happy to be a collaborative members of, and in fact, currently Cal PBR Network is a fiscally sponsored project of OAC, and that's something we're really excited about and hope that many of you check us out. A couple thoughts on beaver restoration is we really see, beaver again as a keystone species that's kind of in everybody's business, is thinking about it from a holistic perspective. And so while I think there's a lot of focus, and we'll mention it here in a bit about relocation, really our central focus is really about coexistence. If you've got beavers, where you got beavers, how do you coexist with beavers to keep the beavers there and let the beavers be the best beavers they can? Sometimes that means we get to do some enhancement to support them. That can mean we can help their expansion, or we can do mimicry if they're not there. Maybe that's pre-beavering for future beavers, or maybe there never will be beavers there, but we can mimic them. And then relocation is a component part of a holistic framework. We're going to hear more about coexistence from Gray, so I won't dwell too much on that, but just I think for us, first and foremost, that's our primary effort in the campaign. The coexistence and enhancement and expanding is a really fun process. This is a image out in the foothills in Lincoln, California. If folks know that area, the Placer Land Trust had this property. And in that image in the upper left there, for a number of years, they had a very levied off, single-threaded, channelized stream, and they were planting out in the dry area and of what was historic floodplain, and they were killing beavers because they didn't believe they could live there. And when folks like Damian Ciotti at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was asked to support them, Damian came in and said, I can't work with you unless you're going to have a beaver peace treaty and stop killing the beavers. And then after that, we can work with you. And they did that. And so over a pretty short period of time, really starting in 2015 to 2017, 18, with not that much money, under $70,000 or so, they strategically removed some levees to allow the water to get back to the floodplain. They stopped killing the beavers. And we were all involved in this, did some pinning of dams to let them persist longer, and also put in some beaver dam analogs. And you can see basically the expansion in the wetland area, which is 1,500% or more within just a couple years in that area. In some cases, beavers are never going to be there, but we can do the mimicry. And this is a project that Kate and I have been doing for a couple years now with Robinson Rancheria on Clear Lake near Lakeport, in an area where we're doing fuel load, our fuels to flows, where we're taking our fire fears and our water woes and connecting those fuels to flows by limbing and thinning and feeding our structurally starved systems this organic matter to slow spread and sink water so it will leak later longer, so it's clear, cold, and copious for Clear Lake in this case. And so that's something we've been doing a lot of. And then certainly the relocation thing, and we were certainly honored to be invited by work with both the Tule River Tribe in the Southern Sierra and the Maidu Summit Consortium in the Northern Sierra near Lake Almanor, Tasman Cayom, with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife in their new restoration program to support beaverback projects that happened back in 2023 and 24 and are ongoingly still happening. And that's super exciting. And all of that is added up to the fact that we've had a number of really big wins since we started the campaign in 2009, 2012-ish, starting with the governor's budget that in 2022 that really created the new CDFW Beaver Restoration Program. And then 2 years later, we were able to pass a bill with Damon Connolly to codify that program in a way where it was in statute so that it wasn't part of the annual budgeting cycle. So those were really big wins to really create durability in the presence of this program. But we did want to kind of say that how we got here has been, for us at OAEC, has been a very strategic effort, and it's been through a process of power mapping. And a power map, not to get too far into the weeds on these things, but you're really looking at organizations, entities, land management folks, public, private, entities that have more influence or less influence up and down, or may oppose our objectives, in this case, bringing back beavers, or support them to the left or right. And our sense was that our power map looked like this in 2012. And you can see a whole lot of folks with a lot of influence that generally opposed our objectives of bringing back beaver. And that then created a set of pathways for us to work on to figure out how to change that and shift that. And then our map here in 2022, you can see, really shifted that. And we moved a whole bunch of folks into the still influential and strongly agree with us. And that was really important. And I think one of the things is recognizing, for instance, we keyed in on obviously the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Natural Resources Agency, the governor's office as the fundamental part of the ecosystem there. And through that, one of our campaigns that we figured out was that the Department of Fish and Wildlife has a depredation policy that was not centering coexistence or non-lethal management. And so we worked with the Center for Biological Diversity, Environmental Protection Information Center. We filed a petition of rule change to the Fish and Game Commission 2019, and 4+ years into it, there was a process where the department changed that policy. And what's critical about that is that change in the depredation policy that centered coexistence and non-lethal relationship was really what then gave us the backing and the capacity, the buy-in to then create our beaver coexistence training and support program. OAEC was awarded this $2 million grant for that program, and I am going to let Gray take it away from here to tell us all about that program. And I'll stop sharing. All righty.
Hi, thanks, Brock. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I want to remind folks that please put questions in the Q&A box. We will answer them that way. Yes, I'm here as the program manager of the California Beaver Help Desk and the Beaver Coexistence Program at Occidental Arts Ecology Center. First up, take a picture of that QR code. Help us spread the word. This is the landing page for the public. If the public is experiencing human beaver conflicts, send them here. Or if you are, go there. Take a picture of the QR code. This is a great, beautiful website at your disposal. We want to thank the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Nature-Based Solutions Wetlands and Mountain Meadows Grant Program for funding us through a year from now. We've got beaucoup bucks to help with beaver coexistence right now, more than California has ever had. So I'll tell you about that program. We have technical and financial assistance for landowners. At that Beaver Help Desk, folks can fill out an online contact form and go through some steps, and we get a free site visit. It's like, what's wrong with that? We can come out. One of our network of beaver coexistence professionals will land on the site quite quickly and take pictures and measurements and talk to landowners about what's possible for beaver coexistence and produce a report with a budget and timeline and regulatory pathway. And should a landowner decide to move forward, we start at a 50% match for installation, the technical support our beaver coexistence professionals would install and do that for a 50% match. But look, if people don't have that funding, we can negotiate that. This is an important take-home message I hope everyone leaves with today. We have 3 situations where beaver coexistence, non-lethal coexistence, really works. These have been tried thousands of times for the last 30 years in other parts of the world, especially eastern United States. Californians are just getting used to this, so you might not recognize these situations. We know that beaver dams cause flooding to infrastructure, and that can be a problem. What you might not know is through pond leveler devices, we can reduce the height of that water level to an engineered specification and stop the flooding, keep the beavers in place. Beavers keep coming back if you trap them and remove them. If you keep tearing apart the dams, guess what? The beavers are going to build them. But a pond leveler device solves both of those problems, saves a bunch of time and money. The other thing we hear a lot about, and we're doing a lot of projects with, is, well, beavers are getting in there and clogging culverts or water control structures in managed wetlands. And there are simple solutions to that situation as well. We call them post and fence structures. And they confuse the beavers. The beavers can't figure out how the water's getting through the culvert, and they give up. Also, tree damage is an issue, almond growers in particular in California, but also parks. You can't just fence the trees with anything. Our beaver coexistence professionals know how to do it. The materials, and we will pay for the materials. If people just want the fence, we will and they install it, we have a landowner stipend program to provide material support. Again, reminder, we will cover 100% costs for site assessments. Any of you working in the Great Central Valley, look at that big flat landscape, probably know these water control structures that are used for managed wetlands to track weirs. You can raise and lower water levels through these devices, and this is some of the ways that we've seen beavers clogging up those things and causing mayhem. But Jacob Byers with Fish and Wildlife Service has invented the beaver back saver, which we are spreading around, literally saving workman's comp claims. You slide this in one of the tracks of the weirs, and voila, instead of an hour a week, you've got maybe a couple hours a year in the initial years, and maybe not even that after the beavers just accept this thing as part of their habitat. Pond leveler device. This is a diagram of one we put in a residential area. You can see that cage just coming out of the water in the picture. And here's the flexible pipe that goes up and under and makes sure that the pond is at a certain level. We're in this case trying to protect a sanitary manhole that the water couldn't flow into, and it has worked even in high flow events. This has been working quite well. Many thanks to the many people that have signed up and are becoming beaver coexistence professionals. The Beaver Institute, who we partner with, the OG Beaver Coexistence folks back east, offer this training. It's 40 to 60 hours online. There's the modules with quizzes and a final exam to pass, and then people get out and need to do 4 Beaver Institute mentored hands-on installation from start to finish. We have provided grant support for about 30 of these people. They're spread out through California right now. Kathy Mueller, who is in the right here, is our first California graduated Beaver Coexistence professional certified, and she's out there doing a lot of work. There's a great article about her work partnering with us in the Alta Journal just out. And yeah, encouragement to do the training or engage the people who have. Here's a little snapshot of what we've been doing. We have 13 people completed through this Beaver Core training. They're part 1, that online 40 to 60 hours. And many of those have done half of the mentored installations. Some of them are getting even further along. And then the smattering of others who are just either having completed part 1 or are going through part 1. And basically, the take-home message is we have coexistence professionals in every county and multiple ones in many counties ready to respond to beaver coexistence issues. This is what our website looks like, very user-friendly. Click on a county and up pop the people, the pros willing to respond to beaver coexistence issues with that, again, free site assessment. The demand has been really rocketing up now that the California Department of Fish and Wildlife knows we're ready to answer questions. Their wildlife biologists and others are sending folks our way. We've got responses from over half of California's counties. We've got 22 projects. You can see the breakdown and what people are asking for. We've got major issues with water districts and homeowners with flooding. You know, that's the main thing, these beaver dams. And guess what? These people are willing to have beavers that just the water level can't go so high. Of course, culverts and these wetland management, water control structures are an issue. We have beavers trimming rose bushes in the delta and other vegetation problems. We, if you're wondering who we would serve, the duck clubs, why not? They're engaging with us. Parks, all sorts of just jurisdictions of parks districts, wetlands managers for waterfowl or that kind of thing in the Central Valley, ducks. Homeowners galore. That's probably where the majority of the conflicts are occurring, on private land with private residential people. Farmers, though, especially almond growers and ranchers, are experiencing problems, and we're responding to those. Those are the types of audiences we're reaching. There's my contact information and our website. Please keep in touch. This is a field that's changing quickly. We're learning new ways to coexist. We're getting into new communities. Sign up for our OAEC Water Institute's newsletter if you like to stay in touch with our program. You can follow us on our socials. Hey, and guess what? If you want to learn more or want to send other people to learn more, we're going to go deeper into this coexistence stuff at a webinar. It's open to everyone, June 10th, 9 to 11:30. Check out our website, save the date, send me an email if you like to get on the list. Thanks everyone for being here and your work with wetlands and your engagement with this amazing ecosystem engineer. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much, Kate, Brock, and Gray. That was great information. And I want to open it up for questions. And Angelica, do we have any from the chat that we want to start with?
Yeah, we had one from Debbie Franco saying, can beavers be managed in the context of wetlands drained seasonally for agricultural use? If not, what non-lethal options does the landowner have?
Maybe I'll take that. So this probably gets to the this weir system that we're talking about. That often that's how farmers manage, say, rice growing, right? Or sometimes forage for waterfowl, right? Where they really want to control the level of water. And those weirs, again, that's we employ the beaver back saver, or again, a fencing structure that can keep beavers from being right up against those water control structures. So absolutely, we'd love to engage with rice growers in particular, who we know are an issue, have an issue with beavers. They've been working really well with fish networks and the waterfowl networks, and we'd like to have a project to help them coexist with beavers in a way that we know will work. We've seen it work in many situations like that. Thanks for the question.
I'll start too. I'm really curious if we don't have beaver on our site and we're interested in creating suitable habitat, do you do site assessments for that as well?
Maybe I would turn that to Brock or Kate. Brock, would you take that?
I mean, sure, we're open to, yeah, reach out to us and we'll, figure out as far as site assessments and to the degree we can be helpful and support based on the question and the goals and the existing conditions, and if we're the right people to help support that, or if we've got such a great network, we can reference other folks to that. I mean, obviously in the beaver space right now, as Gray said, if you've got an issue with beavers themselves, we've got the COEX program while we've got it, but ring us up.
I can add to that too. Thanks, Brock. So this is definitely one of the questions we get a lot of, where can I get beaver? How can I get beaver back to my landscape? So there are some places where, it's a conversation, and it's looking at the landscape and really determining if it would be suitable to have beaver. Do you have the right conditions currently? Is there infrastructure, potential for infrastructure conflict? Do you have beavers nearby that you can just recruit to get to come on their own? Right now, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, while it's amazing that they are relocating beaver, they're not doing it, every single landowner who wants a beaver gets one. It's just not possible, nor is it appropriate. And so there's while there's a credible amount of interest, we need to be realistic and recognize that to go to that amazing effort to move those beaver and try to reestablish them in a landscape it takes a lot of time and energy and resources, and you want to make sure that those sites are just super beaver ready. So if you look at my backdrop here, this is like the super fat if we could all have a landscape like this, is Lundy Canyon, Mill Creek in the Eastern Sierra draining down into Mono Lake. So having enough space, having really good habitat, having really good vegetation, having not some places the predator concentration is so great that it's really hard to get beaver established. We've had this in certain cases in California where that's been one of the cruxes of trying to get beyond a really dense predator population. So lots of things to consider, but we're happy to start the conversation, like Brock says, and then direct you to the local resources to the area that you're working in.
Thanks,
And I'll
Kate.
just chime
Yep.
in to say I just put in the chat, CDFW is the only entity, as they say, that can touch fur legally. And so anyone who's really actually interested in wanting beaver, if you will, you have to go through them. And so I just put a link in there. They actually have a form, and you got to go to that form and you fill that form out and you get in the queue and the waiting list, and they sort through those things. And so if you would like to kick off even being considered for that, based on after all the things Kate mentioned about, do you really have suitable site? If not, what could be done to get it there? But if you think you're ready, then you fill out the form and commence a convo with the Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Peter?
Yeah, hey, thank you. My question was maybe mostly answered. I'm down in Southern California. I live in the Ventura River watershed, but I am the executive director of the Keep the Sespe Wild, which manages, protects, and defends the wilderness area north of Ojai, and a watershed that historically had beaver in it. There is not complete concurrence, I would say, between federal officials and what their science says versus what the archaeological record and ethnographic record says about beavers in our landscape. There are place names for beavers along our watershed. And it sounds like, Brock, you're saying the first step to getting them back on the landscape is to go through CDFW, but can you describe maybe in a bit more concrete terms, like what exactly that looks like? What should the first approach be to start that conversation? I believe that beavers were part of the airdrop that you described in the 1940s, and we had beavers in the Sespe until as recently as 2002. And so, we're interested in taking that first step to get them back into our watershed.
Yeah, hi Peter, good to see you. The Sespes for you all, and as Kate said, the historic ecology maps in California are still quite contentious, specifically down in your part of the world, in the zones where southern steelhead overlap. And thankfully, in our historic ecology paper from 2013 of Coastal California, there's a really interesting documented case where a man named Dr. Hornig actually shot a beaver in the Sespe Creek in the early 1900s. So there's a live beaver in a museum that comes from an area where they supposedly were never native. At this point in 2026, I think if of the folks we've seen who've been successful in getting the department to evaluate, assess, and come to an agreement that in fact they see benefit to marshal their efforts of their department to bring beavers, is they've been at what level of land ownership do you have within that system? How many miles of creek and watershed? How much buy-in? How much consensus? What are the associated resources that you're trying to protect? Maybe other endangered species to benefit, water quantity, water quality, carbon, fire, what's the benefit package that you think is viable? And then are there the conditions there? Is there enough deep water and perennial flow and cover and vegetation, food, construction materials for dams? So there's an assessment and evaluation, which is what Kate and I did for both Tule River Tribe and Maidu Summit Consortium for several years prior, which led the department in many ways and for many reasons, but having confidence on the beaver side that those were good places is based on a rigorous assessment. Kate and we could put links in there of the assessment report we did for Tasman. That's on our website if you want to kind of look at the components. But at some point, you've got to get a hold of, there's your local CDFW biologist, but ultimately relocation comes out of the Sacramento office. It's really under Valerie Cook is the lead of Beaver Restoration Program. It's Molly Alves, who used to be with Tule the tribe up in Washington, who's relocated beavers up in Washington as much as anybody in the nation. They're really running the relocation training. So you got to fill out that form that I put the link into. Start there, but really do your homework up front. Do you have there? Is the place suitable? Is there enough buy-in? Are people willing to go for it so that you have a real proposal, a viable proposal when you choose to engage the department?
And I would just love to add that. So I didn't name it specifically, but one of the concerns that we have been hearing for decades now is just the interaction between beaver and southern steelhead, and there are a lot of concerns, obviously, for good reason. Southern steelhead are not doing well, and so I would say that really getting into the historic records to continue to add to the body of evidence that we already gathered, because there's a lot of folks that just, understandably are still not convinced. And it's a bigger question of what's happening in Southern California with so many dams on so many of these streams, and that, impact on water flows and water quality and the flushing. These systems in Southern California co-evolved with these high flows that would come out and blow out beaver dams. And so that's not happening as much now with the regulated flows. And so we're in a tricky situation, in modern history, where there are certain species that are doing not doing well at all, and the beaver can take advantage of these regulated flows and put in numerous dams, and then it adds to the already deranged hydrology in these systems. So it's a nuanced and complicated situation for sure. We're not, we just keep encouraging people to look through the archaeological records to really get the word out of there is still a question and a concern, and policy is being, dictated by these perceptions. So the more evidence we can find, the better.
Thanks, Brock. Thanks, Kate. Peter, is that good?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you both so much. It sounds like a lot of the legwork up front is really getting the archaeological evidence lined up and getting the storytelling going so that there is popular support for it. And so yeah, we're moving toward that down here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And it looks like there's some questions about reporting and where to hear about different projects that are going on, both LTPBR and beaver-based restoration.
Hey, as we're teeing up that question, so a lot of folks who are here aren't going to follow the acronyms. So if you could just spell them out, that'd be great.
Yes. So questions about tracking restoration projects, including low-tech process-based restoration, beaver dam analogs, and beaver reintroduction programs.
I can start with that. So California Department of Fish and Wildlife Beaver Restoration Program, they put out annual reports that summarize the different projects that they have done around relocation. So they're the ones to go to for that. Get on their mailing list, check their website. I did put the link to the program's homepage. So they're the ones who can report on that. And otherwise, there's lots of different resources. Definitely get on the California Process-Based Restoration Network's email list, because we will put out notices around trainings, or we have, a couple meetings a year that are public that you can get updates about certain things as well. And there's information on that website as well of, how to get involved and if you're interested in volunteering. Sometimes practitioners have opportunities that you can come out to the site and volunteer and whatnot. There's also, it's not fully populated, but I know the Riverscapes Consortium is working on the Process-Based Restoration Explorer, which is a web-based aggregator of projects across North America and beyond. And so that's a place to look at what has been added there. We're really encouraging all of our PBR members here in California to keep adding. It's very underrepresents the amount of projects that we actually have, but it's a good starting place. And I know this network is broader than California, so you can look for projects outside of our states, outside of this state. And otherwise, what else, Brock? What am I forgetting? Any other resources?
I put that Explorer tool link in there earlier. If people scroll up the chat a little bit higher up. Yeah, I think those are the main resources for sure. And then I'll just pick up that other question because it maybe relates to where somebody, Phoebe, is asking about if we know of anyone working to restore watersheds in the East Coast, and it sounds like you're specifically in North Carolina. And there are a whole bunch of East Coast beaver-related efforts out there. The Beaver Institute is up in Massachusetts, but they've been working forever. There's amazing work in Maryland going on. I bet it wouldn't take long to noodle around in North Carolina and see who's doing, work there. Delaware's got work. So yeah, ask the question, query the search engine of your choice, and I'll bet you'll find your beaver people in your region pretty quickly. I will say that anybody who really wants, there's a national conference called BeaverCon, which is coming up, and that's going to be in Minneapolis. It's later this fall, and so you could look at the Beaver Institute primarily hosts, and then there's been a every other year one called State of the Beaver, which has been in Canyonville, Oregon as well. So there are these two national beaver conferences, but BeaverCon is coming up, and they're really fun to go to if you really want to get into it, because then you get to meet people from literally all over the nation, and often international folks from across the pond, the big pond that isn't a beaver pond, um, who will also come to these events.
I have one more thing related, is that the Beaver Institute also has a national beaver help desk. So we're talking about the California one, but if you have issues in another state, definitely reach out through that mechanism to get connected with people on the ground that are working in your state. And we can put that link in the chat as well.
Thanks, Kate. Another add-on from Rob Grasso was that the idea of doing restoration projects and then adding beaver on into that setting, and if there's any reporting out on successes or issues, and that people are some managers are concerned about beavers entering a restoration project and then doing more damage than good.
I can start and then hand it to Brock and even you, Karen. So we've worked in a lot of systems where beaver either were there or they weren't there, and it does have really good habitat where the best way to get those beavers, get the site ready for beaver is to restore them. And so a great example is the Tasman Koyom. Brock, I didn't put that link in there, maybe you have already, of working with the Mighty Summit Consortium in the lands that they were given back to restore the function and really make, create greater diversity of habitat there so that beaver could really prosper. And so much work was done in multiple years that then it was selected as one of the first pilot sites. So that's a huge montane meadow with complex suite of issues going on. And so far, the beaver are really helping, and the results are great. And keeping that water, slowing it down, creating a greater diversity of habitats for different species, and really like trapping sediment. And so we have sites all up and down the Sierra Nevada and the Southern Cascades where these are often worked in tandem of like, okay, let's do the site assessment. Do we have beaver here nearby? Can we attract them to come and join the site or not? But ultimately, restoration is one of the ways that we're going to restore function in these meadows. And if the beaver adopt your restoration project, that can often be a huge compliment, and it actually can help reinforce what you have tried to do. It really depends on the type of construction that you're doing. It's true that a lot of us are doing kind of more beaver based and beaver mimicry, which is smaller scale, light touch, low footprint, not big machinery. And those projects really do well with beaver. The bigger kind of pond and plug where you've got these, earth berm, those could be vulnerable to beaver. I have to say though, the Tasman project, the beaver are utilizing a pond and plug, and so far to no ill effect. But yeah, you do need to keep in mind, if you've got unstabilized soil that beavers might burrow into it. So Brock and Karen, do you want to add anything to that?
I'll just say if you want to see an amazing spot, if you can get yourself to Doty Ravine where the beaver took over and just made a tropical wetland in the middle of the ag land in the lower foothills of the Sierra. It's a pretty amazing site. I
I was
want
just going
to
to support that point that on the slide I showed about Doty, and I would just suggest that as folks are doing, I think is whatever in-stream habitat complexity, salmonid, passage, cover, riparian revegetation projects, at the point when you're thinking that you're going to do that restoration, what we have, I think, witnessed a lot in many, many projects is that people did not ask the question, are beaver native here? Are beaver in the system? If could beaver be here? Ask the beaver question as early as you can, because what I think we found is people do these riparian re-veg projects and they're totally successful in this, as Kate said, because the beavers show up and they're like, great, thanks for planning the grocery store. I'm now here and some building materials. And then people get really mad because the beaver are taking advantage of what they should see as the success of the restoration, but they're wedded to their willow plantings and they think that the willows getting coppiced is a sign of it not working. And if they had thought through, how can we best design this project to create conditions conducive for Castor canadensis, and they would be celebrating and not fighting on with the beaver and at times. And so just greater comprehensive assessment on the front end about existing conditions and future conditions that include beaver would be my recommendation.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I have a question for Brock, if I could ask one soon. My name is Rick Roberti.
Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
Thank you. I have to take off in a minute, but thank you for this. I've worked with Debbie on water solutions for a while, but right now beavers are right below gray wolves in our valley for a problem. We have a lot of problems because nobody seems to want to help us, and maybe we're contacting the wrong people. We've contacted CDFW, but it scares me when you talk about coexistence and act like that they're not going to be a problem, because they're a problem for us. We had several beavers plugging off streams last year. We could get no help where they were flooding out meadows. They were taking away water from people who had paid for that water. And we were pretty much told that they weren't doing any damage, so we're not going to do anything about it, which leads to somebody finally doing something about it. Last fall, we had a beaver dam right next to a pretty active highway. Told that they couldn't take it out. And finally, the local county the sheriff had to get an emergency so that they could take the beaver dam out before that first big rainstorm came in. So there's a lot of things that happen, but we pay for this water, and if we don't get the water, we lose that productivity we have. So we went through the pond and plug system up here, where some of them said they were a success, but they completely dried up the stream because of the low flows in the fall. So we need to be real careful what we do. And Brock, I guess I'll get your number, and if you say you want to come help, I'll give you some opportunity to do that, because right now we're not getting any help from our biologist because they keep telling us they're not doing any damage. That's her opinion. We think it's much different than that. So we do need some help, and we understand that in the right areas, beavers work fantastic, but in the wrong areas, they can be a big nuisance and big detriment to people who are trying to make a living off the land.
Well, I hear you, and thanks for the question. And I think we're pragmatic in these arenas of recognizing, like you said, there's complexity. The it depends answer on this. There is no one size fits all. And I think just a sober assessment of what are the conditions, what are the impacts, and are there some creative solutions to achieve the goals you need on, sounds like water quantity, timing, flow, flood protection or not. And the thing I will say is that the Department of Fish and Wildlife in California, the depredation policy, the department shall issue a depredation permit. They're required to do that. So they still retain, and the landowner can retain the ultimate right or authority to have a lethal relationship or, pull the dam out. But it starts with, are there creative ways to coexist with the beaver that solve for the issues and concerns simultaneously? But it doesn't negate that either those beavers could be lethally managed in the long run if all coexistence was deemed to be a failure, or they may be a place where the department sees an opportunity to, instead of kill the beaver, live trap those beaver and use them for relocation, which has been happening in a few places where, especially with levee burrowing and such, which is probably the hardest coexistence situation we have. And everybody admits that we don't have those tools, or the most expensive. So by all means, you can reach out to me or Gray, who's really, the program manager of our beaver coexistence program and the help desk. And we totally would love to talk with you and see if we can help.
Thank you. One
Yeah,
one of the
and
one of the
sorry.
problems we have is we have people who moved from the city who are now living in spots where there were no people. They think nobody has right to that water, so they do projects, and there's beaver dams or some of them, and that water is appropriated somewhere. And there's so much evaporation in some of these big ponds that we're losing a lot of water. So I guess I'm just going to ask you guys to consider the fact that uh, someone might be downstream from these beavers that is depending on that water, and it shouldn't be stopped, whether it's man-made or beavers, if they have a right or if they're paying for that water. So thank you, Brock.
And
I'll say one thing. It's and you're talking the water quantity relationship to beaver, the flow, the timing, the uh, elongation of flow or not is a really interesting space. There's some peer-reviewed literature on it. We could always use more. The Doty Ravine study that we've both talked about was an interesting place. It's Placer Land Trust, but there's a grazing leasee there, Tracy Shore, if you know her and her husband there. And once the beavers showed up, while there was some grazing ground that was obviously lost to what became wetland, and the fences got moved back to the edge of that wetland, but a couple years back, what Tracy, those guys recognized is they were getting lateral subsurface irrigation far out into their pasture, subsurface irrigating those perennials, and they were able to keep cows on the ground for a month longer than they would have had to take them off because of the increase in the forage quantity. That over was greater than the perceived acres that were lost to active grazing within the beaver piece. So and then we have a number of studies where they're slowing and holding the water back from these peak flow events and allowing it to have latent discharge gets more water later in the season in some areas as well. So it's a complicated scenario around this realm.
Yeah, I know Tracy. I'll talk to her, but some of that water might not have been it might have was supposed to go down to her neighbor below her. And that's the problem. Sometimes they're not taking that much water. But sometimes it affects them if they're on rotational basis where certain people get water at a certain time. And that water comes down, hits that beaver dam, and goes out in places where maybe normally wouldn't have. That water never gets replaced to that rancher who's or farmer waiting down the line. Thank you.
hey, this is Debbie. I just want to offer that I would love to, with WSN, actually coordinate and collaborate. I know, Rick, you are not the only one who has questions and concerns, and I would love to, if you're willing to host up in Sierra Valley, bring folks, other ag folks that we've been in touch with who have similar interests and concerns, to have a conversation with the OAEC folks, because I think there is opportunity and hopefully opportunity to actually experiment together so that we can, because every place is different. And so, and I know, Rick, you've lived in Sierra Valley for 40 years or
Yes. 60 some.
60. Oh,
Thank
60
you, though.
something years. So I think there's a nice crosswalk here between your practical experience and the work that Brock and Kate and Gray have been doing. And I think there's a lot of opportunity, like if you all could have a common understanding to help other folks to understand when it makes sense and when it's having impacts and how you manage in real time. Because even if we said this year it worked great, next year it might not because there's less snowpack or because and then how do you manage that? I think there are lots of good questions to ask. And I appreciate you asking them.
Thank
And
you.
this might be a good segue to a question that I apologize, Anne, for not getting to. How do you find and process beavers that need relocation?
I can answer that. Um, I'm not sure if I understand the question. How do you find and process beaver that need relocation? But as I'm hearing it, if you have beaver that are causing conflict, so usually the way that they get identified are people having conflict and they want them taken away. And so there's a whole wildlife incident reporting system that people are required to fill out with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to uh, basically log the conflict, and then you get contacted by that program, and then next steps are taken. You could, if they are asking you to coexist before relocate is considered, then that's when you would get directed to talk to us. to see if there are coexistence solutions. One of the things about relocation is there aren't enough places to take all the beaver to relocate them. There's that. And so it's not actually the solution. It's a solution that's kind of last resort. And if it works out, there's many different conditions that lead to that being appropriate. And often the beaver, get killed through relocation anyway. But worse yet, when you remove beaver from good habitat, if they will return. And I know a lot of land managers and water managers understand this because year after year the beaver keep coming back. So it's kind of a band-aid. It can provide temporary relief. And so we're really trying to get creative with all the different landowners and figure out real long-term viable solutions that support managing the potential damage and actual damage.
Thanks, Kate. Any additions before Peter? Peter, you have your hand up?
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for having this. This is my first meeting with you. I have a question on the side of the PBR network from the fire perspective. And I wanted to know, looking on your website, you have still in development section for prescribed burning. And if you didn't see my intro in the chat, but I work with biochar in a very similar process of place-based production and in a similar manner with the fuels, but we leave it on site for the benefit of creating more soil and more organic matter in that way. Just out of curiosity, what is your developing role with fire in this integration? Aside from the fuel to flow program that I'm familiar with, is biochar any interest in this conversation at all?
I mean, I can start. Yeah, it's good question there. So yeah, I think if you dive deep into OAEC's Fuels to Flows program, specifically look at our beneficial biomass portfolio concept, and we've got a little graphic there. We're basically saying there's a stand with a desired vegetation management regime that's required for this location. Let's assess the whole site. The fire issues, the soil carbon needs or not, the water quantity quality condition of the upland waterways or not, the surface materials or not. And are there creative ways to coexist with biomass in a way that keeps it on site into the carbon pool, the soil pool, the water pool? And that then there's a whole portfolio of options. Biochar is absolutely a game board piece on that. Pile burning is, prescribed burning is, gully stuffing is, contour retention is, chipping and retaining, chipping and hauling, mastication, right? So it all depends, but as much as we can retain biomass and the organic matter on site for the other functions that life needs in a fire resilient manner that supports water quantity, quality, and carbon in life, we strive to optimize that and then at some point send it to the atmosphere, to the atmospheric pool, but there's plenty of CO2 up there all right now. So we're striving to retain it on site because our river systems are structurally starved, and yet many of our forests are stuffed. And so we can take the stuffed and reapportion that biomass to fulfill water quantity, water quality, recharge, carbon goals. And so I think holistic and biochar is a wonderful resource as part of a mix in that matrix of solutions.
Can I add just one little addition that there are those that are looking at using biochar to remediate mine tailings as well in the foothills. And so that's something else that is part of, that group of folks working in process-based restoration, thinking about.
Thanks, Kate and Brock. Gail, do you want to close us out in this Q&A?
Oh, hi. Yes. Hi, everyone. This is great. Thanks. Nice to see you. I just have a quick question about if the numbers have been crunched on what the gazillion dollars we've spent on watershed restoration has come up to with as far as a total in the state and maybe the Western United States, and also what it costs to do groundwater recharge. And if so, has that been publicized very well?
Oh, Gail, you always ask the piercing hard
I
question.
was going to say, this sounds like actually a question for WSN. And I would say not to my knowledge, and it is something that I've advocated for years. Not just how much have we spent. I mean, really, this gets down to some of our core um, why we exist. We think we should be asking the question, we're spending lots of money. Is the money actually accomplishing what we're trying to accomplish, or is it just, you do a project and you did the project, so you check that box. But so far it's been very unpopular to try to get that funded because it would be a heavy lift to do analysis, partly because we don't actually collect enough information about projects, mostly, particularly when they're publicly funded. Like we just confirm gave someone this much money to restore a meadow. They did, they billed us for XYZ that we believe restores the meadow. So therefore, we're going to say they accomplished the outcome. We're also very bad about funding operations and maintenance or follow-up work. So we fund a project to do something in a place. And then, we may or may not see work done there again for 10 or 20 years. And, this is a constant set of activities.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be too difficult for CDFW to come up with numbers over the past 30 years as far as the fisheries restoration grant program funding that they've spent and what the response in the watersheds was. I think maybe you could do something localized, but it's big numbers. And of course, beavers are going to do that for no cost. And I think that would ring well with the public because the public's really concerned about the cost of everything nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, I think OAEC or Beaver Believer Project, you've done some of that messaging, right?
We have, and I'm super, and hi, Cam. I'm happy to see you're on the chat there. And yeah, the Beaver Mar idea, right? Managed aquifer recharge is kind of a ASR aquifer storage recovery piece. So if we're trying to increase the floodplain connectivity and attenuate peak hydrographs from watersheds that have so much impervious surfaces and excessive runoff and reduced recharge, and how do we slow spread, sink, store, and share? So wherever it makes sense for beavers to be a part of the portfolio of increasing retention and recharge for later utilization by groundwater. I think within the Sigma basins, in all honesty, I have pushed for a long time since 2014, we've been working before about the stormwater management, the slow spread, sink it work, stuff that Kamyar we were doing in those days there, with our agricultural network related documents, which are, if people haven't seen that work, we did share those. And beaver are part of that mix. So let's figure it out. But they're, as the joke slide that Kate had, the transition to me, where it's like, beavers are helpful for one thing, but it's like, let's not pile every dang problem on the back of the beaver as if they're going to solve everything from the ridge to river at this point. In the 10% of the fluvial corridor of a watershed that is blue line stream in any main watershed, it's not more than 20%, to be sober about it. Beavers are amazing in that 10 to 20%, those wetlands, those rivers. But the 80% of that system of most watersheds will never be beaver habitat. And that's where we've got work to be done strategically, collaboratively, to create conditions conducive for everybody, ridge to river to reef.
Thanks, Brock. And there's a great team helping out to keep track of questions, and I'm maybe not doing my job of seeing them. So there is another question that was posted that
it was about success stories and strategies for convincing flood irrigation districts to work with county and RCDs to introduce beaver to project sites along riparian creek systems. And actually, I realized I was talking about flood control, not flood irrigation. I think so. There are positive examples of flood control districts that are working to coexist with beaver, like our Napa flood control district. They have a line item in there for doing the coexistence on the channels that they manage, which is unusual. And also Sonoma Water, we went through a whole process with them to come up with a beaver management plan and install some devices on some of the creeks they're managing, Fire Creek in downtown Sonoma. But flood control, that is a really, again, anywhere where you're conveying water, and it's tricky, and there's human safety concerns, and so it takes a team effort, and you really have to support those that are managing floodwaters in assessing the risks and coming up, with real rigorous, science-based assessments to determine whether or not. And that's what we ended up doing in Sonoma Creek, because they were concerned that the beavers would actually, the dams would obstruct, or the water retained would obstruct and blow out a main bridge that is one of their key roads. And so through hydraulic analysis, they were able to determine that wasn't the case. And so the beaver were able to stay. So there are positive examples, and we can put you in touch with that.
Well, I want to thank you all very much for participating and for hanging in there to the last minute, and hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Nice
Thanks,
to be with
everyone.
Hi,
you.
everyone.